Hi, I'm Randall Douglas, and this is my colleague Paul Edwards. And we are starting a podcast series here, beautiful Mount Maunganui, New Zealand. And please pass. And there's a number of issues we wanted to address that we see in the world today. Obviously, this is a period of great global unrest, internal discord, and it seems to be the order of the day in the world. One of the things we think has really changed in the last couple decades is the art of dialogue, where people can just talk. So Paul and I often disagree, and we improve both our wisdom by that process because we don't argue. We can discuss things until we find that middle ground, something that seems rare these days in a polarized world. But we are also looking ahead and see that there needs to be a consilience of thinking in order to save the Earth's resources.
Yeah, so Randall and I, you'd imagine, vastly different. You can tell by my accent, I'm from the United Kingdom and Randall's from the United States. Randall has a medical background and I have a military background. You'd say that's oil and water. We should never be able to come to any form of agreement. But on most topics we discuss, we do. We think we've got a reasonable handle on how to get things to improve and how you can start having good dialogue amongst the many people of this world.
We also do recognize that we both were born in 1957, which was a different world. And we do recognize that. Why we want to bring in dialogue and conversation from younger people. That's what we think has to happen. The energy of the young with the wisdom of the old, and this can be a very bright future for humanity.
Yeah, Randall, the one thing that everyone has to know is, though, we both have young teenage children.
Yeah, we're both fathers and who are committed.
Fathers.
But who are committed to leaving a better world to our kids.
Yeah, we've always been committed to leaving a better world. The world is really at its best of time and its worst of time, no matter what time you live. Yeah, so Randall and I are now at the base of the mount, just coming off the base track, opposite the entrance to Taronga Harbour, and we're about to go to the very tippy top. The topic of our discussion today will be how do we use, or can we use military force to help keep our environments safe, and can it be used to take away the problem which we have called the tragedy of the commons, whether it be overfishing, overpopulation, overexploitation of the Earth's resources. Everyone is very, very clear in their mind something must be done, and when that clarion cry of something must be done, what do they mean? What can be done? We're now walking around about 50 meters above sea level, and as you can see from the landscape we're in, not only is it beautiful, but this is an area where the heavy rainfall in 2011 caused a slip, and the slip created this like a little horseshoe feature which we're now walking around. So Randall made a very good point about hard power. What does hard power mean? Some people will find this uncomfortable, but hard power means the synchronized orchestration of maximum violence to achieve an objective. Now, if the objective is good, in my head that's a good use of hard power. You use the most efficient and effective means possible to achieve that objective. But, and it's a big but, the use of hard power can be bloody and brutal and absolutely horrific. It is something that is already happening, though, in the world. And I'll let Randall speak to that when he talks about migratory species. Over to you, Randall.
Thanks, Paul. The big game animals of East Africa are a good example of how countries can cooperate for the common good and avoid the tragedy of the commons. When Kenya and Tanzania got together, thought apolitically, used technology and hard power, and protected the migration route of the big game animals in their entirety, leaving no gaps for poachers, they were able to dramatically increase the number of animals in the parks and therefore tourism. Compared to 1972, when my family last visited Serengeti National Park, here is 2017, and there were many more animals in the park, but less animals between the park because they'd been eaten. With the Pacific bluefin tuna, these fish are literally running a gauntlet. If they get intercepted anywhere along their migratory route, for example off the west coast of North America, they never return to the Sea of Japan to spawn, and the entire ecosystem collapses from above. So as my friend Paul says, using hard power to defend the Earth's resources is probably something that's inevitable for humans, as we do and always have fought over resources. This is no different than any other life form on Earth, though. And it looks like it might just be written in the DNA. And so we look around the world at the larger countries with the more power, power being defined as the ability to act. And we say, yep, they do sometimes push other people around, but overall, since 1945, the New World Order has done a very good job overall of not using nuclear weapons and keeping things fairly peaceful, to the point where our population has literally quadrupled since 1925, when my dad was born.
Again, you see that idea of soft power? The soft power is, where do you get?
Well, isn't there a saying that war is diplomacy by other means?
Yeah,
in that at some point humans fight, and this is the way of the world. It's no different with bee colonies.
Yeah, that's the military theorist Clausewitz talking, and it is diplomacy by any other means. NATO is a political organisation organised along the lines of collective defence. An attack on one is attack on everyone. So therefore, you are punch the smallest member of NATO, and you get a massive fist in your face back. However, there is also flexibility in that doctrine. We don't have to all be the ones who counter. So Article 5 is, for those keen to read it, under the North Atlantic Treaty, is the one to read, about collective defence. Maybe that's the way we should look at our environment. Let's build a model of that we can use as a framework about looking after our environment. The Paris Agreement, which is purporting to look after climate, it has very little teeth, if any, and relies on the voluntary. How do we change that way of thinking? Just shrieking and creating damage in our environment is not the way to go. We need a better way. How do we get there?
So as Paul is bringing up that vision of using military to save the Earth's resources, we can see how difficult that is, as all humans are and always have been competing over those resources. Even something like Greenpeace has found that it needs a wing similar to Sea Shepherd, someone that's actually going to go out there and do something about it. And if you watch the movie Seaspiracy, you can get a much better idea of what's been happening out on the open seas, and how you could say this is definitely another age of piracy. All right, we've now arrived at the top of the Mount Maunganui, and it's school holidays, as it turns out, and we're not the only ones. It's a pretty popular looking day here, and just families out doing what they do, and this is great. We see this vision of the world as something everyone would probably enjoy. A peaceful place to raise a family.
So here we are at the top of the Mall, and Randall's just busy setting up the camera. I'm sure you're seeing these pictures. In a minute he'll walk into view. We've had an enjoyable conversation discussing how do we help fix the environment, how do we connect to other generations, how do we see the world going forward in the future. You know, I'm from a hard power background, Randall definitely from a soft power background. It's a really complex question. It's going to take a real lot of intellectual effort to solve some of these problems, don't you think, Randall?
Yeah, and I think so. But even more than that, really just some of the dreams, the energy and the hopes of the younger generation. That's what we would like to connect with. If we could add a little bit of wisdom to that, again, we see that consilience that is the next phase for humanity. Signing off, Randall Douglas with my colleague Paul Edwards.
Yeah. See you next time. Let's think of something else to talk about. Thank you, sir.